The tools that a hunter uses to bring down the beasts in Monster Hunter World are vast and varied, but none are more important than the weapons they use. I'm Darcblade, and in this series of the Monster Hunter World weapons, we're going to be taking a look at the various weapons and tools of the game. In this episode, we're going to bring you an overview guide of the longsword. The longsword is a large weapon that utilises fast attacks and a unique spirit gauge to deal enhanced damage. Despite the weapon's long reach, it is not the heaviest of weapons, and a hunter is able to remain quite nimble while using the blade. On top of that, this weapon comes in incredibly useful when it comes to severing tails or other parts of a monster. At the start of a fight, a longsword may not pack much of a punch, but as the fight goes on and you utilise your spirit gauge, this elegant weapon becomes much more deadly. But anyway, let's move on to the basics of the longsword. Now, for the purpose of this video, I will be quoting PlayStation controls, although you can either look down in the description for converted buttons or work them out yourself depending on what system you are using. The first move available to the longsword is the overhead slash, which is done by pressing triangle. This is a fairly standard overhead attack that can easily lead into combos. Next is thrust, which is done by performing circle. This is a straightforward on the spot attack that thrusts the sword forward. Next is fade slash, which is done by pressing triangle and circle. This is a wide sweep that is more of a defensive move, as your hunter jumps back while performing this. You can also choose the direction the hunter jumps by using the left stick whilst pressing triangle and circle. Now, with all these moves, your spirit gauge will fill up red, indicated in the top left hand corner of the screen underneath your sharpness meter, but we'll talk about that more later. And then next is Spirit Blade, which is done by pressing R2. You can continue to attack with R2 for a Spirit Blade combo. Now, as you use the Spirit Blade attacks, you will deplete the red bar of your spirit gauge. However, we'll go into more details of this shortly. The other two basic moves are the foresight slash, which is done by pressing R2 and circle. This is a defensive move that can be performed mid-combo, and whilst doing so, it grants you a brief moment of invulnerability. If you should take a hit during this, your hunter will spark blue for a brief moment before landing a hit on the monster. You can then chain this into a spirit round slash with R2 afterwards, which is also linked to the spirit gauge. And then finally is the Spirit Thrust, which is done by pressing R2 and triangle. This is a lunge and thrust move that, if hits and you have enough tears on your spirit gauge, will allow you to perform a Spirit Helm Breaker, a devastating hard hitting move. Now, there are more basic moves available to the longsword. These are moves that can utilise the environment like slopes and that, but we'll talk about those in the more in-depth video later on. Now, moving away from the basics to talk about the unique functions. Now, some of these basic moves may not make sense at the moment. That is because all of these basic moves are linked to the spirit gauge, a unique function of the longsword. The spirit gauge is indicated in the top left hand corner of the screen underneath the sharpness bar. Now, as you deal damage to a monster with your basic attacks, namely triangle, circle or your fade slash, this bar will start to fill up red. Whilst the meter has some red on it, you'll be able to utilise Spirit Blade attacks, which is done with R2. Should the meter be filled up enough, you can perform a combo with Spirit Blade, which is a 4-hit combo. However, the 4th hit of this combo is called a Spirit Round Slash. Now, this is important because when you hit the Spirit Round Slash, you will upgrade the spirit gauge, indicated by a pulsing white aura around the gauge itself. This can be done 3 times, and with each upgrade it increases your attack power, so you always want to strive to upgrade this as quickly as possible. So the spirit gauge upgrade will be tier 1, which will have a pulsing white spirit gauge, tier 2 will pulse yellow, and tier 3 will pulse red. It's also worth noting that your spirit gauge will decay over time. Another way to quickly upgrade the spirit gauge would be to utilise the foresight slash. Should you be able to successfully land a counter attack with R2 and triangle, and then follow it up with R2, that R2 will be a spirit round slash, so you can upgrade the spirit gauge a lot quicker. Now, each time you upgrade the spirit gauge, you have to start filling it red again with normal attacks. Now, remember as well, going back to the Spirit Thrust, if you should do the Spirit Thrust followed by the Spirit Helm Breaker, which is R2 and triangle, and then triangle again, this will decrease the tier of your spirit gauge by 1. So a typical rotation for the longsword would be to attack with your triangle and circle moves till the spirit gauge fills up red. Afterwards, perform a series of attacks with R2 until you perform that Spirit Round Slash. This will upgrade your spirit gauge, indicated by the aura pulsing around it, then you can rinse and repeat. Now, the other two unique functions of the longsword, which I don't need to go into too much detail because I've already mentioned them quite a bit whilst talking about the spirit gauge, is the foresight slash. As I said, this is a move that provides an invulnerability window should you time a monster's attack correctly. If done correctly, whilst you back up for the hit, as soon as your hunter is hit, it will spark blue, indicating that you've done this correctly. You will then attack the monster. Afterwards, you can press R2 again to do a spirit round slash to upgrade your spirit gauge. And finally is the Spirit Thrust and the Spirit Helmbreaker. Now the Spirit Thrust itself, if you should connect, then it will cause your red meter of the spirit gauge to fill up automatically for a brief period. Once you've upgraded your spirit gauge at least once, then you'll be able to perform the Spirit Helmbreaker after the Spirit Thrust. This is the highest damaging move that you can do with the longsword. However, it can be tricky to aim at times, and should you miss, then it's a waste of resources. Also, the Spirit Thrust is most effective the more red you have in your spirit gauge. But anyway, let's move away from the unique functions to talk about the basic combos available to the longsword. The first is a very basic combo, which is done by pressing triangle, 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 triangle. It's the standard bread and butter combo that helps build your spirit gauge energy. Next is the Spirit Blade combo, which requires the majority of the spirit gauge to be filled up with red. This is done by pressing R2, 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 and then R2 one more time. The final hit of this will be the Spirit Round Slash that upgrades your spirit gauge by 1 tier, but has a slight drawback of sheathing your weapon. And then finally is the Fade Slash combo, which again requires your spirit gauge to be filled up slightly. This is done by pressing triangle and circle, then R2, R2 one more time, and then R2 and triangle. If you have your spirit gauge upgraded a tier or 2, you can then follow it up one more time by pressing triangle for a Spirit Helmbreaker. Now let's move away from the basic combos to talk about the pros and cons of the weapon. The first major pro is the spirit gauge. With the longsword, the longer the fight goes on, the more powerful the weapon becomes. If you're able to manage the spirit gauge, keep it topped up and upgrade it to the different tiers, you'll be doing optimal damage with this weapon. The other major pro for the weapon is its reach. Despite being a fast weapon, it is a long blade, meaning that with most combos, you'll easily be able to hit a monster. However, sometimes you can trip up your teammates. The biggest downside of the weapon though is it has a little in the way of defensive options. Yes, you have the foresight slash, but apart from that you're resorted to rolling or dodging, and there's no way you can block a monster's attack with this weapon. Anyway, overall the longsword is a nimble weapon that comes with decent movement speed, the combos are fairly straightforward, and it comes with very good reach. If you decide to use this weapon though, you need to learn how to manage the spirit gauge, how to upgrade it quickly to the various tiers, and how to best spend its energy. The foresight slash is something you need to get used to using as well. It is one of the only defensive options available to the weapon, however getting good with this could take time. As you learn the various monsters in the game, you should get better at this. But in all honesty, it's a high risk, high reward move. If you're at all interested in picking up the longsword, just remember that as a fight goes on, the more deadly this weapon will become. Now remember that this first series of videos are overviews taken from the beta of Monster Hunter World. Once the game is fully released, expect much more in-depth videos for the different weapons and tools of the game. So I hope you found this video interesting, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you an overview guide of the longsword in Monster Hunter World. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.